You're quiet, but you're dangerous. They don't understand silence because they've never learned to listen. They confuse stillness with weakness because they've never sat with their own chaos. But you know better. You've been building in the dark while they were busy performing in the light. You don't show your pain. You don't broadcast your plans. You don't scream for attention because you don't need validation. You need victory. You've been disrespected silently. You've been overlooked repeatedly. You've been counted out by people who couldn't even count their own worth. And you stayed silent, not because you were afraid, but because you were becoming. They didn't know you were studying while they slept, training while they mocked, healing while they lied, sharpening every scar until it became armor, sharpening every word until it became a weapon. You're quiet because you've seen what loud people are hiding. You've seen ego without substance. You've watched arrogance fall apart in silence, and you know real power doesn't brag, it moves, quietly, relentlessly, without apology. You've been underestimated for too long. They laughed at your calm. They disrespected your kindness. They took advantage of your forgiveness, and now they're going to learn. Quiet doesn't mean harmless. It means calculated. You've watched people disrespect you, and you let them. Not because you're weak, but because you were collecting data, because you were learning how they move so you'd know exactly where to strike if you ever needed to. You don't move with emotion, you move with precision. You don't react, you wait. You don't explode, you execute. They think you forgot, they think you forgave, they think you fell off, but you've been in silence building a version of you that doesn't need revenge, because success is the only punishment you believe in. You don't compete, you dominate. You don't announce what's coming. You let the impact speak. They don't understand that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one watching everything, the one measuring every move, the one who speaks last, because they've already won internally. Your power is in restraint. Your strength is in your discipline. You felt pain that would have destroyed most people, and you kept going. You've lost everything and still showed up with fire in your chest. You've been counted out, lied to, mocked, and still chose growth. That's not weakness. That's war. You are war in human form. And the world hasn't even seen what happens when you stop holding back. You're not interested in proving anything to anyone because you know who you are. You know what you've survived, and you know that people only understand you from their level of awareness, not yours. You've outgrown the need to explain. You've outgrown the need to be liked. You've outgrown the need to be chosen by people who couldn't even choose themselves. You're quiet because you've learned that noise doesn't equal strength. Most people talk loud to cover their insecurities, but you've sat with your demons. You know every wound. You've tasted rock bottom. You've danced with darkness, and you walked out with fire in your eyes. You didn't just heal, you hardened, not in a way that lost compassion, but in a way that now requires respect. You don't chase people. You don't beg for closure. You don't repeat yourself. You cut people off with silence. And that's why they fear you. They don't miss you. They miss the control. They miss the version of you who let things slide, who said it's okay when it wasn't, who tolerated disrespect out of love. But that version of you doesn't exist anymore, because that version of you died the moment you realized no one is coming to save you. So you became your own savior, your own rescue, your own revolution. You don't beg to be seen anymore, because you've realized that those who couldn't see you never deserved to witness your rise. You're not chasing closure. You're creating distance, not because you're petty, but because you're finally protecting your energy. You understand now that people who hurt you repeatedly weren't making mistakes. They were making choices, and you're done explaining yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need apologies from people who faked love. You need progress, you need peace, you need purpose, and none of that lives in the hands of people who took you for granted. You're not bitter, you're not cold, you're just finally aligned with your worth. You don't let people back in because they miss you. Missing you is easy, respecting you is what matters. And when someone shows you who they are, the first time, you believe it. You move accordingly, you adjust your access. Because this version of you doesn't entertain chaos dressed as connection. You're quiet now because you've learned that the loudest room is usually the most insecure one. You don't need to prove power. You embody it. And the ones who laughed at your calm are now speechless at your discipline. They thought you'd break, but you built. They thought you'd fold, but you forged steel. They thought you'd fade, but you've never been more alive. They always thought your silence meant you had nothing to say, but they were wrong. Your silence was discipline. Your silence was awareness. Your silence was strength in its purest form. You watched them lie. You watched them manipulate. You watched them play the victim in a story where they were the villain, and you let them. Not because you didn't see it, but because you were done wasting energy on people who feed off chaos. You don't try to change people anymore. You let them be who they are, and you walk away without explanation. Because closure doesn't come from conversations. Closure comes from self-respect. You've built a fortress around your mind. You don't entertain every opinion. You don't absorb every insult. You don't respond to every provocation. You've learned that not every attack requires a reaction. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Let them guess. Let them wonder. Let them talk. While you move, while you build, while you grow, while you become everything they said you'd never be. You used to want revenge. Now you just want distance. You used to want closure. Now you just want clarity. You used to want them to understand your worth. Now you're just focused on living it loudly. Without them, you're not the same. They'll try to come back, not because they love you, but because they lost control. They'll pretend to change. They'll say they miss the old you, but you know better. They don't miss you. They miss the access. They miss the version of you who didn't know any better, the one who let them get away with everything. But that version of you is dead, buried beneath every betrayal, laid to rest under every lie, replaced by someone who will never tolerate that kind of disrespect again. You don't entertain nostalgia. You don't romanticize the past. You don't answer late-night texts from people who created daylight damage, because you're not lonely. You're focused. They don't understand the power of a focused mind. They don't understand what happens when you channel every scar into strategy, every pain into purpose, every setback into strength. You used to break in silence. Now you build in silence. You used to beg. Now you build boundaries. You used to drown in overthinking. Now you breathe power. With every step you take, they won't see you coming, because you don't move for attention. You move with intention. You don't play the game. You redesign the board. Because when you're quiet, you're calculating. When you're quiet, you're becoming. When you're quiet, you're preparing to win so loudly, they'll hear you without a word. They'll tell you you've changed. They'll say you're cold now, that you're distant, that you're not the same anymore. They're right. You're not the same. Because growth requires loss. Because peace requires distance. Because self-respect requires standards. You're done explaining that to people who benefit from your confusion. You're done making excuses for why you let them stay. You're done shrinking just to keep them comfortable. You've reached a point where silence isn't just power, it's protection. You don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need everyone to like you. You're not for everyone, and you don't want to be. You speak less because you value your voice now. You react less because you found your center. You apologize less because you're finally living in truth, not approval. People hate when you stop needing them. They hate when you start thriving without their permission. They hate when you break cycles. They were still comfortable living in, but that's not your problem. Their comfort is not your obligation. Their insecurities are not your battle. Their version of you is not your reality. Let them talk. Let them lie. Let them watch. You've got nothing to prove, but everything to build. And you're building it in silence, day by day. Step by step, brick by brick, until the world can't deny the power of the one they thought was powerless. And that's the most dangerous thing of all. You used to wait for people to change. Now you change rooms. You used to hope they'd finally see your worth. Now you don't care who's watching. You don't make announcements. You make moves. You don't need closure from someone who was fine with wounding you. You don't need validation from people who only clapped when you were small. The old you was starving for approval. This you is starving for legacy, for silence that pays off, for nights where peace isn't a stranger, for days that don't involve shrinking to fit in. They'll say you got too serious, too focused, too distant. But that's what happens when you stop playing dead for people who only show up to bury you. You've outgrown the games. You've outgrown the small talk. You've outgrown the apologies for being intense. Because you are intense, and that's your power. You don't flinch anymore. You don't beg anymore. You don't let ghosts from the past pull you back into graves you've already climbed out of. You mourned that version of yourself. You buried him. And now you're something else entirely. You're not just alive. You're armed. With lessons. With discipline. With a fire they can't touch. And you're done giving out matches to people who only came to watch you burn. You don't fight for attention. You fight for mastery. You don't post your pain. You process it in private. You don't let everyone into your world, because most people are tourists in places you built from pain. You've earned your silence. It's not emptiness. It's strategy. It's not avoidance. It's ascension. They won't understand how you went from crumbling to cutting loose, how you went from breaking to building, how you went from begging to vanishing. But that's not your concern. You didn't come this far to be understood. You came to rise, and that doesn't require their permission. You've learned that real power doesn't need to prove itself. It shows up, it delivers. It leaves a mark so deep, the silence echoes. And that's what you are now, an echo of everything they could have had if they had respected the quiet one. You're not the weapon, you're the war. You're not the storm, you're the aftermath. And they're just now realizing that the person they underestimated was the one rewriting the whole story in silence. Let them tell themselves whatever helps them sleep. You're not there anymore. You're not explaining yourself. You're not sending final messages. You're not looking back. Because the most dangerous thing you ever did was go silent and start building a life that doesn't need them in it. You were never looking for revenge. You were looking for redemption, not from them, from yourself. You wanted to look in the mirror and finally see someone who didn't settle, someone who didn't apologize for being stronger now. You let them think they won. You let them talk. You let them laugh. Because you knew the real victory would never be loud. It would be permanent. You don't run toward anyone anymore. You let people earn their place, and if they don't, you keep walking, because you've built a life that doesn't crumble when people exit. You're not holding doors for people who slammed them in your face, not anymore. Your peace costs too much to bargain with. Your time is currency now. Your silence is a boundary. Your absence is a consequence. And they'll feel it, not in rage, but in regret, not in explosions, but in emptiness. Because they took advantage of a version of you that no longer exists, and the version that remains doesn't bend, doesn't break, doesn't beg. It builds, it reigns, it destroys quietly, and it never looks back. So let them wonder where you went. Let them choke on the silence. Let them talk to the echo. Because you're gone. You're built. You're free. And the quiet one, the one they thought was weak, that one was dangerous. That one became everything they never saw coming.